Now we talk about an architect, a Chinese architect born in Tokyo, who is considered kind of the father of modern architecture in China. Although when you see his works, just like the works of Hermann Muthesius, you wouldn't really call them easily modern, but you have to understand, it was beginning. So at the beginnings of anything, there is, if not hesitation, but, a certain lack of, excessiveness, because it's a beginning, not yet crystallized modernity. So I don't know if we can find the correct pronunciation of his name here, Liang Sicheng. I guess in China, the first name is the family name and the second name is the first name. Born in 1901 and he died in 1972 when China was clearly a communist country. I like this picture of him that I discovered on the web. A very passionate architect and very knowledgeable. He is considered even the first, one of the first archaeologists in China. So let's read about him. You see, he was born on the 20th of April, 121 years ago. Liang Sicheng was a Chinese architect and architectural historian, known as the father of modern Chinese architecture. His father, Liang, you read it, was one of the most prominent Chinese scholars of the early 20th century. His wife was the architect and poet. Let's read this again. The architect and poet. Very, very nice. Lin Huiyin. His younger brother was one of China's first archaeologists. Sorry. So his brother, I remember something, but I didn't read carefully enough. So his brother was one of the first archaeologists. What can we say? I think in China there is still, and there was even under the communists, a great respect for scholars and even poets. They had in their ancient history, important emperors who also practiced calligraphy, poetry, something which is not done very often, and certainly not in the present. In the present, most presidents are, and they are presidents, of course, they wear gray suits and, white shirts and ties, and they are lawyers or, bankers, or you are not going to find in the present, unless you talk about the Arab world, perhaps there are some eccentrics there who are also practicing poetry, like the leader of Dubai. But in the Western world, no way. Anyway, this architect, as he was born in a family of intellectuals, and this mattered. So Liang authored the first modern history on Chinese architecture, and he was the founder of the architecture department of Northeastern University, that is in the United States, in 1928. I think in the United States, because I know there is the Northeastern University in the United States, but maybe there is one in China too. And Tsinghua University in 1946. He was the Chinese representative of the design board, which designed the United Nations headquarters in New York City. There was Le Corbusier there too, and Oscar Niemeyer, and of course, Wallace Harrison. There were really important people there. So the fact that he was part of that group says a lot. He, along with his wife, Lin Huiyin, discovered and analyzed the first and second oldest timber structures still standing in China, located at Nanshan Temple and Fogwan Temple at Mount Gutai. I have to tell you something. I have a German book published in 1928 about China, Baukunst und Landschaft in China. It is one of my preferred books. It is beautiful. Images of old villages in China are unbelievable. And China has at this moment hundreds of thousands of old villages, many of them deserted. But there is there an incredible potential for a development of architecture. And I'm not the only one to say so. Wang Shu, the celebrated Chinese architect, said kind of the same thing. I think China, if China, well, I understand its need to develop quickly Manhattan-like cities almost overnight. If China turns its economic power and certain wisdom derived from its long history and culture towards its many very interesting villages, I think we would have a revolution in architecture. I truly think there is great potential in rurality. And even Rem Koolhaas, with his latest show at the Guggenheim Museum, which was about the village, about rural life, seemed to think in the same way. I even proposed to the schools of architecture here to have a department or the faculty of ruralism, not just urbanism, but also ruralism. I think there is great potential there in the villages of the world, those that are still alive, because of the closeness to nature. And we need nature, we need oxygen, and we need the village. So I truly think rurality is of great importance. Anyway, so this architect from China, he is recognized as the father of modern Chinese architecture. Princeton University apparently said this, which awarded him an honorary doctoral degree in 1947, issued a statement praising him as a creative architect who has also been a teacher of architectural history, a pioneer in historical research and exploration in Chinese architecture and planning, and a leader in the restoration and preservation of the priceless monuments of his country. Here he was as a young man. I think he was born in Tokyo, and we see a picture of him in older age. And here he is. This is a picture of him and his wife, architect and poet. And I will say it again, architect and poet. You know, how many architects today write poetry? Very few, very few. Although graduate from Bucharest, was an important poet, Daniel Turcea. And to my surprise and joy, and also a little bit of embarrassment, I found out about him when once in Paris, I was stopping in front of a stand with books. I was with a bicycle. I stopped because I saw some little books on poetry, which I liked, the way they looked. And there was one with Daniel Turcea. And I knew nothing about Daniel Turcea. But the translator into French also was Romanian. And it was a beautiful discovery that an architect, and unfortunately he died very young, 20 something. Daniel Turcea was a mystical poet, a religious poet, but he also studied at the University of Architecture in Bucharest. So back to Liang and his wife, Lin, I think. This is a monument. It was really very hard to find, and I couldn't identify them. It's possible because of course, I don't know Chinese, and some pictures were, you know, the text was in Chinese, so I didn't know what I was looking at. But I do have some pictures here. This is a monument for this person from 1929 that he built. It's a tombstone, a monument. Of course, the exoticism of the language, graphically speaking, is in itself enticing and interesting. Now, the hall and library at this provincial university, 1930, I only found a few black and white pictures. very small resolution. It's true that for that time in China, this looked kind of like a modern building. Um, Again, sorry for the pictures. I couldn't find, new. I mean, I don't know if the building still exists. Um, further research is needed, but I think it is important to also know architects from other countries, other cultures, other times, because architecture is not reducible just to post-Renaissance culture. No, a geological building and female dormitory at Peking, Beijing University, 1934-1935. Well, this looks modernistic, all right, indeed. It almost looks like a building built by the the functionalist Hans Meyer, who was the second director of the Bauhaus. Um, you would be surprised, no, that a teacher of history would build something like this. But I think we see all the reasons why he was called the father of modern architecture in China. It's just that I couldn't find for the time being enough pictures to convincingly show this. But this is a modern building in small resolution, black and white, but it is definitely a modernist building. Now, this memorial hall from, I think I missed a number there after 1960 something. This is very different from what you saw earlier. And I don't know exactly what he did here. Maybe he built, a building in, I don't know, 1960s, because he died, I think, in 1971 or 1972, that related to the traditional architecture of China. I don't know enough at this point to say more about it. I did read that he was advocating a Chinese architecture. He was even, commissioned to investigate and promote, from a nationalist, positioning, a Chinese architecture. And he arrived at the conclusion that what we call Chinese architecture is mainly derived from an architecture where the roof is ample and it dictates the aesthetics of the building. And that's what, in a way, we see here, an extended roof of a certain amplitude, this roof. So it's a roof architecture in good measure. Of course, it's not the only architecture in the world where the roof is important, but in China and also in Japan, the roof, you see, nobody forced him to, curve the roof towards the corner, but the corner is a very important part of the building. And, aesthetically, structurally, even, metaphorically, do we ask ourselves what the corner of the building is in a way the most vulnerable part of the building, but it's also the most structurally important. And so the roof also in the corner becomes a little different, at least for this building in the center or at the top. The roof architecture of China is worth exploring, and perhaps not just of China. Now, we end this very short and almost inadequate presentation with a picture. There is this prize in China from 2020, Liang Sicheng Architecture Prize, which bears his name. But the picture associated with the prize is actually of his library. I'm a little bit confused. I don't know where the picture was taken from, but I like what I see because of the drama of these huge rocks, these huge stones. And I guess his building is what we see through this opening. Anyway, a dramatic nature, and drama is always Here is a picture of him investigating an old structure. I like old pictures in general, and this reminds me a little bit of a picture I saw of Le Corbusier on the Acropolis near a huge fallen column. The architect smells architecture, so to speak, in the vicinity of such relics, and what we look at here is indeed impressive, even if this is broken, or maybe even more so because it is broken. And I said a few words about the roofing. Well, here also the coiffure of the building, to use a rather questionable word, the top part of the building matters, because the top part of the building is that transition between the terrestrial aspects of the building and the celestial ones that hopefully it might aspire towards. And I think this is the last image of this presentation. Library of we already discussed a little bit about it, of this so-called normal university designed by this architect, is the same picture, but seen a little bit from further away. That's it. So let's wish him happy birthday, and I thank you for being here today.